I think it's a great idea to get revenge for cheating. I'm really looking forward to the first day of deer hunting season. It's like Christmas as a kid for me. It always falls on the first Monday after Thanksgiving in Pennsylvania, and it's a state holiday. Many schools close because a lot of students from the lower grades and many teachers will be out in the woods of Penn on Monday, instead of in the classroom. At the last minute, a client from California asked me to be available on Monday to check on his account. I tried to talk him out of it and even asked him about meeting with another company representative. The account was important to the company, which made it important to me too. For the first time since I turned 12, I spent the first day of deer season at work. I decided I wouldn't have to leave for our hunting camp until Monday night, so I'd miss out on all the fun. I'd enjoyed the day before the hunt, so I'd be behind on beer consumption and poker money lost. Hopefully I'd be able to make up most of the lost time on Monday night. I packed my hunting gear into my pickup truck, threw a case of beer in the back seat, and made the 3-hour drive to our hunting camp. My wife Barb left me a note saying she was going out with a couple of her girlfriends and wished me luck on the hunt. I wasn't fooled. I knew most wives were happy to see us guys away from home during the first week of deer season. It was a little vacation for them. I was about just an hour from home as I followed the twists and turns and curves of Route 6. I saw the service van in front of me chisel a beautiful deer and throw it off to the side of the road. As I slowed down, I saw another deer, a female, fly off the van and fall next to the male. I pulled over to the side of the road and shined my headlights. I switched on my pickup truck's headlights and looked at the unfortunate animals. The deer had beautiful antlers, nearly 2 feet apart. The females were considerably smaller. Both were as dead as last year's dandelions. I immediately made a decision. I pulled tags out of my hunting jacket, filled them out, and hung them on the deer. Then I loaded them into I turned the truck around and headed home. I needed to get the deer somewhere I could butcher them before they got too cold. The longer I waited, the more difficult and damaging the process became. I stopped at a friend's old barn about 2 miles away and turned on the outside light. I used a field lantern to illuminate both deer as I worked on the male. I admired his antlers. He was the cutest deer I'd ever seen. It occurred to me that I had a great opportunity to win a large deer shooting pool at my hunting club. I debated the moral issue that could arise from the fact that this was actually a prey from a traffic accident and not a prey from a hunt. I quickly dismissed any doubts that crept into my mind. My thinking was that the biggest antlers on a legally tagged deer were the ones I'd qualified with. Besides, I'd never been close to winning a hunting competition before, so I decided to head home to clean up and change my clothes. No matter how many times I'd butchered deer, I couldn't do it without getting blood on my shirt and jeans. I loaded the deer into the back of my truck and headed home. I had filled my tags and had no reason to rush back to camp. By the time I got there, it would be too late to drink beer or play cards. At least I had my animal tags properly secured, I thought, as I turned onto the dead-end road that led to my house. I had already seen a friend. One of my colleagues had a tag fall off his deer. The local county judge, Ray Parker, refused to admit that the deer was properly tagged and that it was fate that intervened to rip the tag off the animal. Parker was known in our town as the hanging judge because he only handled small lawsuits and law enforcement cases under $10. I didn't think it would do me any good to get in front of this in court for illegal hunting charges or traffic violations. It was well past 11. When I pressed the remote to open my garage door, I saw that the house was completely dark. I figured Barb was already in bed and probably asleep. I was surprised to see that I couldn't pull into my garage. My usual spot was occupied by a brand new Lincoln. Barb's Jeep was in its usual spot. I walked around the Lincoln and felt the hood. It was cool. The car must have been there for a while. At some point, I found myself walking into my house, keys in hand. I paused at the door and listened. The house was dark and very quiet. I felt a little nervous, so I walked up the stairs to the bedroom. As I approached the master bedroom, I heard loud snoring. I'd been sleeping with Barb for 25 years, and she never snored. My insides clenched. I walked through the open door into the bedroom. The moonlight was enough to make out 2 human figures on my bed. I then wondered why I was sneaking around my house. I reached out, turned on the light, and waited for the storm to follow. No one even flinched. Barb was sleeping naked with her arm around a man. The man had a round beer belly and lots of belly and chest hair. I reached over and pulled the pillow off his face. It was the hanging judge, Ray Parker, asleep in my bed with my wife's left breast in his hand. It's funny what crosses a man's mind at times like that. I was most outraged that my wife had invited such a pathetic individual into her bed. She and I both knew a bunch of guys who, from time to time, I thought about going to get him. But then I saw the empty wine bottles on the nightstand. No wonder he didn't notice the bedroom light on. They must have been drunk to a stupor. I went downstairs to get my rifle. Next time that bastard wakes up, he'll be dead. I started thinking about the situation. The husband is usually the main suspect. Even if someone else shot the gun, I'd probably still be convicted of murder because I had such a strong motive. I should have been smarter than that. Then I noticed the horn sticking out over the side of my truck. I was pretty sure I didn't want to go to jail before I showed the other guys my deer. And one of the contestants, Parker, wasn't worth missing out on this once-in-a-lifetime pleasure. Anyway, Barb and I haven't been getting along very well lately. I quickly devised a plan B and put it into action. I took my deer hunting tag off the deer that was in my truck and carefully placed it in the big trunk. Then I pulled out an old 12-gauge double-barreled shotgun that I'd bought from an old drunk a few weeks before he died, almost 20 years ago. I never told anyone I had it. It was an extremely deadly and illegal weapon. I wiped it down with an old rag so it wouldn't leave fingerprints and put it in the trunk next to the deer stalker. I even found a pillow and threw it in the trunk first, then ripped off the tag that warned it was a federal offense to remove the thing. I put a relatively new pillow in the trunk first, removing the tag that warned it was a federal offense to remove the item. I then went into the house and filled the kettle with very hot tap water. I filled a cooking spritz with it and went back to the deer in the trunk of the Lincoln. I poured some hot water into the gutted cavity and waited. After about a minute, I used the syringe to suck out a fair amount of bloody water from the corpse and poured it into a bowl. Then I filled the syringe from the deer's body again and parked my truck around the corner of the house. I put on my son's hockey mask and went back to my rather noisy bedroom with Barb. It was almost impossible to wake her. If she kept sleeping, my plan would work better, but I was ready to get creative if needed. I took Parker's clothes from the chair in the bedroom and put them in the closet. I noticed his cell phone was still on his belt. I then put the bowl and syringe on the nightstand and climbed onto the bed, placing my knees on either side of. Barb reached that position, so I gave Parker a little push, but he carried on snoring. I pulled the deer heart out of the bag I'd put it in when I carved it. Some guys at camp like to marinate them with beer and crackers, but I've never been that keen on that particular organ. I opened the leather latch holding my hunting knife and exposed the blade. Then I poured the blood from the bowl onto the sheets and onto Barb's chest. It's amazing how little blood it takes to make it look like a crime scene. Barb reached out and lightly rubbed her left breast while the liquid quickly dried. Then she lowered her hand again. I emptied the bowl, set it back on the table, and picked up a syringe from the table. I held it over Parker's face. I then lowered the heart down about 4 inches above Parker's snoring mouth. Holding the heart in one hand, I squeezed it very hard and squirted bloody water on Parker, some of which went into his mouth and caused him to choke. I quickly put the syringe down, picked up the knife, and began to drive the point over the heart in my left hand. I kept an eye on Parker and he let out a laugh that was more like the Wicked Witch of the West than the Wicked Witch of the West. He hissed and suddenly straightened up sharply. He looked at the heart in my hand and then at Barb's bloody chest. He coughed and spat out the blood he'd swallowed. He sighed convulsively. Then I turned my masked face to look at him. That was enough. He jumped out of bed and rushed down the hallway like a rocket. All I had to do was I had to get to the garage because he was opening his car door completely naked. "You're next," I shouted, as he slammed the door shut and sprinted out of the garage. I went back upstairs and put Parker's clothes back on the chair, took his cell phone from him and put it in his pocket. I also took the time to pull Barb's cell phone out of its knot bookcase and put it in my pocket too. Then I took the bowl and syringe. I put them in the sink with the rest of the dirty dishes. I turned on the dishwasher and went to my truck. I turned off all the lights and closed the garage door. I was only a few miles down the road when I noticed a large Lincoln standing on the side of the road. I suddenly realized that there might be some truth to the old theory that a couple of pounds of sugar in a car's gas tank can have disastrous consequences. I saw what I thought was a naked man running down the highway about half a mile away from the car. As I drove closer, he turned and ran toward the shore out of sight. I couldn't believe my eyes. What kind of sick, crazy bastard would run naked in late November in northern Pennsylvania? I saw my duty clearly. I grabbed Parker's cell phone, dialed, and reported the disturbing sight I had just witnessed, but I forgot to. I left my name with them so they'd know WHU contact. Less than an hour later, I drove past the spot where I'd seen the 2 deer killed. I picked up Parker's cell phone and called my home number. The call went to the answering machine. The first time I called, I hung up and called again. This time, Barb picked up after the fourth ring. "Wrong," Barb said, sounding preoccupied. "Turn on the light and see what's left of your lover." I hissed into the receiver. I waited about 10 seconds and then heard a primal growl. Barb must have seen the blood and found someone's heart next to her in bed. That was the only thing that could have upset her that much. "You crazy bastard," Barb yelled into the phone. "Phone, you killed Rye. You'll never get away with this. I'm calling the police." The phone in my ear went silent. I smiled to myself, thinking of the story Barb was telling the police at that very moment. I pulled up to the hunting camp around 4 in the morning, hung my deer on a pole we had for that purpose, and noticed a couple of smaller deer already hanging there. I grinned to myself as I walked into the cabin to find old Dan McGraw already cooking breakfast. He'd been chosen to cook for the group, and he could go hunting until the next meal. He put a plate of bacon, eggs, and potato pancakes in front of me, and I took a bite. Tom Burton got out of bed and went outside to check the weather. He was gone for a minute or so, and then he burst back through the door. "Get that deer, Dave," he asked in a demanding tone. "That's the biggest one I've ever seen." This question caused a mass exodus out the front door. There are few things that give a hunter more hope than the sight of a beautiful deer taken by someone else. It renews their hope and fires their imagination. I explained how I had stopped by a friend's house at dusk the night before. I went out into the thickest thicket of brush and mountain. Laurel found and came upon a large male. As he ran full speed through the dense thicket, I stalked him and shot him. The rest is history. While the other guys pulled on warm clothes and put on their insulated boots, I stripped off my clothes, climbed into my bunk between the sheets, and fell sound asleep. A few hours later, something jolted me awake. I opened one eye and saw a head in a police cap. "Mr. Reed, I hate to interrupt your hunt, but I have a few questions for you," he said calmly, not trying to hide his sarcasm. I stared at him for a few seconds, then sat up and scratched all the places a man should scratch when he first wakes up. Then I pulled on my pants and shirt and headed for the coffee pot. "Now that's a nice deer with your tag. Where and when did you get it on a friend's?" "Property. The time is on the tag," I answered slowly. "Our state police officers on the hunting license have the wrong person." "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Reed. Your wife called the Springville police this morning. She said you killed her lover, who turned out to be County Judge Ray Parker. She said you cut out his heart and left it next to her on your bed. To make matters worse, Parker's car was found abandoned. About a mile from your house, a search of the car turned up a dead deer and a sawed-off shotgun in the boot. There was also a pillow with the federal tag removed, which the officer added after thinking for a moment. Parker's body has not yet been found, but it's only a matter of time. Mr. Reed, why don't you make it simple and tell us where you put Parker's body?" The officer insisted. "Wow, you guys are good." I just grinned and said, "Skip all that. The police are conducting a forensic investigation. They're trying to get someone to confess to a murder when there's no body, no motive, and no weapon." The police officer picked up my hunting knife, which was in a plastic bag, and waved it in front of me. He said that jealousy is the oldest motive. Not many men are happy when they find out that their wife is unfaithful. We just need Parker's body, and we'll have everything we need to send you to prison. I'm really disappointed in the way various law enforcement agencies are handling this situation. I couldn't help but grin at the surprised cop. You drew the wrong conclusion and then tried to prove that it actually happened, instead of finding out what really happened and following the clues to where they will lead. You tried to get a confession about something that didn't really happen. The last time I saw Ray Parker, he was running through the woods naked. I don't know why. Perhaps it was because I was thanking the hunting gods for giving me a magnificent trophy deer. Or maybe it was because he saw me in the same room where I slept with my wife. Either way, he must have felt some kind of irrational guilt-induced fear, which made him run out of the room naked. I wondered if Parker was still alive. Why was there a heart in your bed? As I said, I have a ritual I go through when I get the blessing to take a big deer. I kneel down in my bed and pick up the deer heart as a sign of gratitude. Then I place the heart on my bed as a sign of appreciation and respect to the gods of the hunt. I added, with all the reverence available to me at that moment, the policeman's walkie. The phone rang. He went outside and spoke in a muffled voice for a few minutes, then he went back inside. Ray Parker was found half an hour ago wandering naked in the woods. 2 hunters found him and pointed him in the direction of the road. I think once they realized who it was, they refused to give him any clothes or just let him out. They told him they were there to hunt, not pick up trash. The officer smiled and thanked me. When he gave me my knife back, he asked me to stop by the local police station and give a statement. I promised him I'd do it as soon as I finished my week-long hunt and crawled back into my bunk. I stopped by on Friday afternoon. The police were annoyed that I waited so long to make my statement, but that wasn't my problem. It seems that Ray Parker accused me of making him believe that I had cut Barb's heart out and even planted a deer and a shotgun in his trunk and ruined his Lincoln. I have the right to practice. I told the police officer who questioned me that if he wasn't happy with my rituals, he should stay out of my marital bed. That way, he wouldn't come into contact with them. As for the deer and illegal weapons, I've sat in the courtroom and heard him tell people himself when he's been caught red-handed. I think it's time for him to face the music and take responsibility for his actions. I don't know anything about the deer, the gun, or his car wreck. He's got hundreds of enemies, didn't he? The cop also told me he had a pillow with the tag removed, which is a federal offense. I'll look into it on Friday night. I was asleep at home on Friday night when I felt the bed stir and woke up to find Barb sitting on the edge of the bed next to me. She hadn't been there when I went to bed. I think you know I called our kids and told them to lock the doors. I told them you went berserk and killed my lover, and they should call the police if you showed up on their doorstep. Barb began. I'd heard something about it now that you mention it. I admitted quietly. You may have even heard rumors that I called the police and told them that you cut out Ray's heart and left it lying in our bed. Barb continued. Ada even tried to prosecute him for taking the tag off the pillow, but I think that's legal since the pillow has already been sold. You can take those tags off once you pay for the pillow, I replied in surprise. I suppose the same can be said for mattresses. I never knew that, Dave said. It seems obvious. It was a new pillow, and now it's covered in blood and some kind of filth along with all the other linens and pillows that were on that bed. You didn't have to resort to that ruse. Rye has enough problems. In the other cases, he's been accused of knowing your character. I'm still surprised he didn't have crack and prescription pills in his trunk. I have no idea what you're talking about, Barb. Parker is a cool dude. I never knew he was into illegal stuff like that. I mean, I always knew he was sleeping with my wife, so I don't know what more I could have done to find out what he's like. You're not going to be happy with that fool lying next to you for long, Dave. Barb said she's been married a couple of times and can't keep her legs closed. She'll spread them for someone else the first time you turn around. I've come to the conclusion that this is true for a great many women. The difference is, I don't expect much from Doris. She's not the brightest, but she's great in bed. Look at those tits, I exclaimed, pulling back the sheet that covered the sleeping woman. I told you a long time ago that if I ever caught you cheating, I'd be in your cousin's panties in a heartbeat. You were warned, so don't complain. It doesn't suit you, Barb. You really set me up. I only cheated on you a couple of times. When you get tired of Doris, we'll be even, won't we, Dave? Until then, I'll sleep in the guest room. I've been staying with Susan, but my daughter has made it clear to me that she thinks I'm a terrible mother. I shouldn't have called our kids and told them to lock the doors in front of you. They would never have known about my mistake with Rye. I said thoughtfully, you never would have told them, would you, Dave? You always had a rule about never scolding me in front of our kids. You made me do it on my own. I lost the respect of my husband and kids because of some pompous. What are you going to do now, Dave? I'm going to wait until you leave the room, and then I'm going to wake up your cousin, and we're going to have a nice time together, I said with a grin.